Hi everyone, this is Jadine. Thanks for joining us for this installment of our vlog, Issues at a Glance. This week we're going to be talking about Line 61, which is a pipeline that cuts diagonally across Wisconsin. And to kick us off, we're going to start by heading over to hear from Elizabeth a little bit about the history of Line 61, as well as more about tar sands oil itself. See you soon.
I'm happy to provide a little history about the Line 61 pipeline and tar sands oil and our fight to try to stop it from being allowed to be so large before we talk about the newest updates about that pipeline corridor. So the tar sands team, which is Sierra Club and 350 Madison's joint team working on tar sands pipelines in the state, actually got its start working on the Line 61 pipeline. So I'll tell you a little bit about the history. Some of you have probably been around since all of that happened and you're very familiar, but for those of you that aren't, I hope this is useful context. So the Line 61 pipeline is actually a tar sands pipeline that starts in Superior and it travels down through the heart of Wisconsin. It goes into Illinois and it travels to Flanagan, or it goes to Flanagan, Illinois, where it meets up with other pipelines. It starts in Superior. That's a little hub for Enbridge. And in Superior, it connects to the other pipelines that start in Canada and travel through northern Minnesota. So it's actually a pipeline corridor. There are 4 pipelines in it, but Line 61 will be the biggest. So in 2014, Enbridge announced their plans for the pipeline. It has been in the ground since about 2006. It was at roughly 400,000 barrels a day. And Enbridge announced that they wanted to build pumping stations to more of them along the pipeline route, which would increase the capacity or increase the pressure, allowing more oil to flow through the pipeline. So they weren't changing the physical size of the pipeline. Instead, they were just pushing more oil through it. You can see those pumping stations by the little circles on the map. And they said that their goal was to get up to 1.2 million barrels a day. That is huge. For context, Keystone, if it ever gets built, which it probably won't, but the Keystone XL pipeline is slated to be 800,000 barrels per day capacity. So this would be 1.5 Keystones. The next largest pipeline in this state, which is called Line 6, is about a little over 600,000 barrels per day or 660,000 barrels per day. So this would be about double that. We did some research. Beth Elliott, our tar sands team lead at the time, did some research. The only place she could even find a pipeline that large, was a small, tiny stretch in Russia that was 1.3 million barrels a day. So this would really be unprecedented. So of course we were concerned. Part of the concern wasn't just the sheer volume of oil, but the fact that it was tar sands oil. So in case you're unfamiliar with tar sands oil, just kind of a quick overview. Tar sands oil starts in the boreal forest. It's buried under the boreal forest. And the first step to getting to it, to extract it, is to clear cut the forest. The boreal forest is actually the world's largest carbon sink, even bigger than the Amazon. So that's one of the reasons that NASA scientist James Hansen famously said that if we allow the full extraction of the tar sands industry, it's game over for climate, because just cutting down that forest is devastating. After clear cutting it and getting this, they mine it. They get this sort of combination of the tar sands oil mixed in with the rest of it, and they have to extract it, but it's still this, they call it peanut butter-like texture. So in order to move this oil through the pipelines, what they do is they actually mix it with a chemical cocktail called diluents, which includes cancer-causing chemicals like benzene, and that allows it to be like what some refer to as ketchup, which allows it to flow through the pipeline better. As you can imagine, ketchup, it's still got sort of some graininess related to it. And so there's concern that that makes it more abrasive as it's flowing through the pipeline, and could be one of the reasons they found that tar sands pipeline, this was a report done by Greenpeace, I believe, but we'll put a link to the report in the notes. Tar sands pipeline spilled 3.6 times as much crude oil per mile than the national average between 2010 and 2012, which was what this report looked at. So this was really concerning, especially if you consider where the pipeline is in Wisconsin. It travels through a bunch of really major areas. It starts right there on the shores of Lake Superior, and then it travels through the state, crossing. So it's built under a lot of our really important waterways. In addition to Lake Superior, it crosses the Namakagon River and the headwaters of the St. Croix River in 3 different places. Then it makes its way down the state, crosses the Wisconsin River just upstream of Pentonwell Lake and Crystal Lake. And down south, it crosses the Rock River. So some of Wisconsin's most important rivers are crossed by a pipeline carrying something that are a pipeline that could rupture. And one of the things we know about tar sands oil is that if there is a rupture, it's a lot harder to clean up in water than traditional oil, if you will. Because of the kind of weird combination, what happens is if you don't get to it right away, the chemicals, those diluents they add, end up going to the top and sort of evaporating off. And then the rest of the oil actually sinks to the bottom, and it's like chewing gum. It gets stuck to the bottom. So it's really hard to clean up. Because of this, we worked really hard. Our tar sands team formed and worked really hard to stop Enbridge from being allowed to increase capacity to 1.2 million. It was just too unprecedented, and the danger was too great to be able to allow that to happen. Unfortunately, the DNR moved forward or opted not to really stop Enbridge from being able to increase capacity, and Enbridge moved forward with plans to do so.
So, as we just heard, Enbridge is working on expanding the capacity of Line 61. So now we're going to hop over and hear from Rob a little bit about what that expansion actually looks like.
Hello, my name is Rob Lee, and I'm a staff attorney at Midwest Environmental Advocates, a nonprofit environmental law center based in Madison, Wisconsin that works to protect public rights and natural resources. Thanks to the Sierra Club for having me today to talk to you about an air permit that Enbridge Energy recently obtained from the Department of Natural Resources for the company's terminal in Superior, Wisconsin. That permit authorizes Enbridge to install vacuum breakers on 21 crude oil storage tanks at that terminal. And these vacuum breakers will enable Enbridge to send even more crude oil down the Line 61 corridor that travels through the heart of Wisconsin. Now, these vacuum breakers, they're just valves. They allow extra air into the tanks when negative pressure is sensed, which otherwise would disrupt the flow of oil through the tanks and ultimately reduce the capacity of the terminal. But more crude oil traveling through the Line 61 corridor increases not only the likelihood of a spill, but also the amount of oil that would escape into the environment before the spill is detected and the pipeline is shut down while repairs are being made. This means that the environment and the public health, including the health of nearby landowners and residents, not to mention their property values, are put at even greater risk than they already are. In addition, the extra air that enters the tanks eventually has to be released into the atmosphere. And when that occurs, it is saturated with harmful, volatile organic compounds. The time to transition away from fossil fuels and mitigate anthropogenic climate change is now. Authorizing Enbridge to pump even more oil through Wisconsin is just another instance where we are going in the wrong direction. Enbridge needs to stop exploiting the people and resources of Wisconsin and start being part of the solution rather than continuing to be part of the problem. Thank you.
So the impacts of tar sands pipelines are clearly widespread, from boreal forests to climate change. They impact everybody in different ways. But Rob mentioned the health and land value of nearby landowners close to Line 61 and other pipelines. So now we're going to go on a virtual call with somebody who is directly in this fight and has something to say about it.
This is Mark Borkart speaking. I'm a resident of Marshfield, Wisconsin, and my home is located just a few miles west of town. And my wife and I, on our property, we have 4 Enbridge pipelines passing through. 4. And now we've just recently learned plans are to take Line 61 and expand that from approximately 800,000 barrels per day to 1.2 million barrels per day, passing through our property. And it's just very discouraging as a landowner to know that this is happening with no notification to us at all. I'm not aware of this. None of my neighbors with the pipeline passing through their property are aware of it. And this is an easement. Enbridge does not own this land. They only have an easement on the land. And yet, from my understanding, this pipeline, its length is going to be the longest, most highly pressurized pipeline in the world, passing near our homes. Enbridge likes to claim in their literature they send to us and their presentations just how we're all good neighbors, that we're just neighborly folks, and they want to be neighborly. Well, if I had a neighbor who had an easement through my land with let's say a driveway, I would be very upset if without telling me they turned it into a super highway, an interstate. And this is essentially what Enbridge is doing. It's just another example of how once Enbridge gets an easement, once they have control of the land, all the neighborliness goes away. They actually have a very poor track record in how they treat landowners. I'll be really surprised if if they come out and tell us what they've done to our land and how they've increased the oil capacity, the pumpage through that oil pipeline. It puts all of us, all landowners with this pipeline passing through, it puts all of us at the risk. We bear all of the risk and get none of the benefits. Not a penny, nothing. Very disappointing.
Unfortunately, there isn't much we can do at this point to stop Enbridge from making this massive pipeline carry so much oil. But what we can do is say enough is enough. Enbridge is working currently to build a new segment of the Line 5 pipeline in northern Wisconsin and is working in Minnesota right now to lay the plans to build a new pipeline that would bring more oil into Superior, creating the need for yet another pipeline in the Line 61 corridor down the heart of Wisconsin. While they're doing this, Governor Evers' task force on climate change is working to figure out how Wisconsin goes carbon-free and create a plan to get to 100% clean energy. Instead of Enbridge working to support that or seeing the writing on the wall and figuring out how they can start embracing clean energy, they're using this time to do maneuvers like this to just get as much oil as possible through the Midwest, through Wisconsin. Wisconsin's Line 61 corridor already carries 20% of the US's 20%, the equivalent of 20% of the amount of oil the US uses. We have plenty of oil traveling through this state. We need to be moving away from oil. Enough is enough. So what you can do, a couple of things. You can contact the governor and lieutenant governor and climate task force members and tell them no new pipelines in Wisconsin, no Line 5 segment, no Line 61 twin, and don't allow any more upgrades. We don't need more oil. No more oil should be allowed to flow through this state. Also, write a letter to the editor. Most people don't realize how much oil we have flowing through this state. So write a letter to the editor, private message us. If you want help with that, we're happy to help you. But let people know what's happening and the need for us to move off of oil quickly. Thank you for everything you already do.